Right now, the way that Morpher looks is kind of boring. Last time we fixed the movement problems, but I still feel like there's a lot of character and spice that's missing. So let's fix that. First, we're going to fix how the spikes roll on the player. Now, because Unity only draws sprites every frame, moving a sprite faster and faster doesn't actually produce any motion blur. Eventually, you can spin these spikes fast enough that every frame the spikes just move one spike over and it looks like nothing happens. So I went ahead and added some motion blur to the player spikes. Next, I want these spikes to spin only when the player spins. And how I've been doing that so far has been just using Unity's built-in physics system. And this has led to a whole host of issues, namely the player will spin at different speeds across the same surface, regardless of how fast they're actually moving. And this is because Unity's physics system uses friction, and so if we animate the rolling as a separate object, we'll have control over how fast the player looks like they're spinning, regardless of how fast they're actually spinning in the physics system. To put that all together, at low speeds the player behaves as normal, and then when they pick up speed, that original spike sprite is turned off, and then the animation kicks in. And then finally, at higher speeds, that animation is sort of kicked up a notch, and it looks really nice because of the motion blur. The next step I wanted to take was to make the player feel a little more lively by using some fluid animation principles. The game King of Thieves has a pronounced animation for the player, and I want something similar. And you can see how the thief really stretches up or down when the player jumps or hits walls. I have a main object for my player, and then some child objects that contain sprites. Here I can stretch the individual sprites themselves rather than the player to get this stretching effect. Next, I had to automate this stretching effect. I wanted to recreate that rolling tire effect, where the tire stretches in the direction that it's rolling in, as if the rolling is so powerful as to stretch the tire itself. Obviously, we don't want this when the player is sitting still, so I created a dead zone where the player just rolls like normal. And then when the player rolls faster and faster, the body distorts more and more. And you can see the subtle change here on these hills because the player slows down just enough to trigger it. Okay, all of this is good, but the thing I was really excited for was animating the player's jump. Looking back at King of Thieves, there's this stretching that occurs when the player is in the air, and then when the player lands. Here in this ball animation, the ball is most stretched just before and just after hitting the ground. We can recreate this effect by making the player's stretch height a function of the player's speed. See, an object's speed is fastest just before and just after hitting a wall. In other words, the player's speed should stretch the player's sprite more and more. We want this number to go between 1, where the player looks normal, and 2, where the player is most stretched and moving fast. And I know it doesn't look right here, but this is actually working exactly how we wanted it to. We're just missing the bounce animation. Now, I was trying to avoid hard-coding animations because I don't want the player to be animation dependent, which can lead to all sorts of glitchy-looking gameplay and bugs. And more specifically, I want the player to look reactive to the environment. But I think the bounce will be short enough that it won't be an issue. And so I just threw together this coroutine, and I just call it whenever the player hits the ground. And, well, after tweaking some values a little bit, we actually get a spectacular jump animation. I'm really happy with how this looks, especially since it was so simple to throw together, and it really just livens up the gameplay, getting Morpher closer to that Mario 64 prototype I've been talking about. It's literally just fun to jump and use the core gameplay mechanics now, which is kind of the point of a game. Next time, I'll be working on tackling a new enemy and combat system. In the meantime, stick around, leave a comment. I'll be playing some of your games, as well as checking out some development tools. And as always, I'll see you next time.